I call this story, Be Careful What You Pray For. I've had 5 major car accidents in my life. And I'm not talking about the kind of accident where you get out of your car and you look to see if the damage is worth reporting and then you move on. I've had a few of those, but I'm talking about major car accidents where the police are called, a ticket is issued, most of the time a tow truck is needed, and sometimes you even get to ride in an ambulance. In 3 of those 5 accidents, my car was totaled. And I could argue that those 3 accidents were unexpected direct answers to my prayer. This is a story about one of those accidents. I totaled my first car when I was 19 years old. It was a 1973 yellow Camaro. My pride and joy, and boy did I look hot behind the wheel. That accident turned out to be an unconventional answer to a prayer, and it definitely saved my life. It happened at a time in my life when I was in a really dark, destructive place. I believed I was a mistake, I wasn't wanted, and my family treated me like I didn't exist. I felt isolated and worthless. I started hanging out with the wrong crowd and getting into the wrong things because that's where I felt I belonged. Most of my days were spent hanging out at this horseback riding stable in Wakanda. Not the Wakanda from the Black Panther movie, the other Wakanda. I was one of the trail snags at the barn. These were the kids that worked at the barn in order to be able to ride for free. And the kids that we trail snags, we kind of made a Frankenstein-like family. We were all different scrap pieces sewn together from different broken homes and broken lives. We were all lost souls. And out in the forest preserve trails, we experimented with anything and everything that would help make our pain go away, at least for a little while. In the evenings, I would do an impressive amount of underage drinking. At the skanky bar up the road from the barn, on a good night, there wouldn't be a knife fight or guns drawn. This was my escape. I was so miserable and in so much pain that I started toying with the idea of suicide. Late at night, I would sit at the kitchen table with a really sharp knife, and I would test the pressure of the blade on my skin, daring myself to make that cut. I would never actually do it though, because, and this is going to sound strange, I'm terrified of death. You see, I was raised Catholic, and that's kind of an understatement. I was surrounded by uncles and aunts that were nuns and priests. We even had a Monsignor thrown in the mix. I was thoroughly marinated in Catholicism. And I had always been told that suicide was a one-way ticket to hell. So I was afraid of what would happen if I actually did the deed. But I also wasn't even sure if I believed God existed anymore. So I had all this inner turmoil going on, and I read the book The Stand by Stephen King. For those of you who are not familiar, it's a story about how 90% of the world's population gets wiped out by this horrific plague, and the remaining people divide into 2 groups, the believers and the non-believers. And I know it came out in 1978, but in case you haven't had a chance to read it yet, spoiler alert, the believers follow a God-like person to salvation, and the rest follow the devil to destruction. So basically, this book pushed all my buttons. Does God exist? What happens if you don't believe? And, death. The book scared the shit out of me. And for weeks after reading it, I couldn't sleep, and I'd cry, and I'd plead with God to please give me a sign. Show me something. Show me that you're there, and show me that dying is okay. Please help me, please. I was terrified. And then one night, God answered. I'd gone out to the farm in the evening to see my favorite horse, Music Man. Taking him out on the trails was a pure joyride. Writing music was the only time I truly felt free and happy. When I got to the farm, I discovered he was lame. He couldn't move his front leg, and nobody seemed to know what was wrong with him or how to help him. And I was scared, and I was devastated. And it was late when I left the barn. I was very worried, and I was distracted. I was out in the country, in the middle of nowhere, and it was dark. And I went to turn left onto the highway, and I thought I looked both ways. And I pulled out, and suddenly there were lights, brilliant lights, right there. And at the moment of impact, I knew I was dying. This was it. This was the end. And while the car was moving, I was overwhelmed with this feeling. Words don't do it justice. It was unbelievable peace, joy, bliss, tranquility. It was paradise. It was truly heavenly. And I felt like, no, I knew nothing in this world matters. None of the fears, none of the hopes, dreams, plans, anxieties, or worries that we have. Nothing mattered anymore. And then I remember sensing a presence in the car with me. I even turned to look at the passenger seat, and there's no one there. And I heard a voice say to me, Terri, this is what it's like to die. It's not your time right now, but this is what it's like. And then the car stopped moving, and I got out. My precious Camaro was crumpled and broken in the middle of the highway. The hood had popped off on impact and was lying way down the road. The whole front end was at a 90-degree angle to the rest of the car. The cars collided in the front with such force that they hit and then smacked in the back and catapulted off in different directions. The other car, a minivan, was in the ditch in the middle of the road. Its front end was gone and the back end was smashed too. The cop at the scene said the other driver never had a chance to brake. In other words, he was going at least 55 miles an hour when he hit me. The cop also said, an inch further over, and I probably would have lost both my legs. I know this accident was the answer to my prayers. I know this not just because of the voice that I heard, but because both cars were totaled and there wasn't a single injury. There was a family in the minivan, a dad and a mom and a little boy, and we all walked away without a scratch. The voice was right. It wasn't my time to die. That accident saved my life. It turns out I had a lot more living to do and a few more cars to total. And I now know God exists, and I no longer fear death. I guess I'm a living example of the old saying, be careful what you pray for, because you never know how God's going to answer. I just wish she'd stop answering me with crunching metal. Fair warning for all of you, I did some praying today before I read this story. So I'll give you all a 15-minute head start before I leave. Thank you.